Good evening and welcome. Sorry, we had a little technical challenge, as can sometimes happen. Went from sound to no sound, but we are here with plenty of sound for the rest of our time tonight. So welcome to this evening's community conversation. We're excited to have you here. And hi, Monique.
Hi, welcome everyone.
So I am Reverend Mary Margaret Earle. I'm the Senior Minister and Executive Director of the UU Urban Ministry, and we are pleased to welcome you to our second season of Community Conversations, hosted by the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry. The mission of the Urban Ministry is to work across race and place to dismantle racism and white supremacy culture and to advance racial, social, and economic justice. We do a number of things in 2021, including operating a domestic violence shelter. We run a workforce development program for trauma survivors and offer after-school programming for Boston High School students. We also engage and serve our Roxbury community through the arts and culture and through lectures and workshops and conversations like tonight's.
And thank you everyone for joining us for tonight's Community Conversations. Community Conversations highlights the history, art, and the experiences of Black and Indigenous people of color. These conversations provide an opportunity to raise awareness around some of the issues that plague the residents of color in Boston neighborhoods. These conversations also provide information on how to support organizations in the work that they are doing every day to help people of color. It is our hope that these conversations continue in the coming year, virtually and someday in person. Please stay connected with us to find out more about upcoming conversations. And again, thank you for joining us this evening as we discuss economic justice and closing the wealth gap with Ujima Project. Thank you.
And we're going to start with something that we call our Commitment Minute. The Urban Ministry is grounded in John Eliot Square in Roxbury, and we are encircled by about 50 Unitarian Universalist congregations that engage in our work in a variety of ways. And one of the ways is to support these conversations as a way of supporting racial justice. I am so proud that tonight's community conversation is sponsored by one of our member congregations, First Parish in Concord. First Parish in Concord has been a faithful friend of the work of the Urban Ministry and has shown itself to be a very engaged congregation in the work of social and racial justice. It is our pleasure to share this Commitment Minute featuring my dear and talented colleague, the Reverend Howard Dana. Here's our Commitment Minute.
This is Reverend Howard Dana from First Parish in Concord, Massachusetts, and I'm glad to be doing this Commitment Minute for the UU Urban Ministry. First Parish in Concord and the UU Urban Ministry have long been partners in good social justice and anti-racism work, and I know that we in Concord are strengthened by our work with the UUUM, and we hope that the same is for that organization. It has been wonderful to see the meeting house go through the changes and to work with Mary Margaret and to find ourselves such good and lasting partners in this work. We are especially pleased that the Ujima Project is going to happen. We are actually doing it as one of our Share the Plate recipients in 2022 and are glad to partner on this as well. All blessings on the work of the UU Urban Ministry, and long may our partnership be healthy and happy and fruitful in both directions. Best wishes to you all.
So nice to hear from our friends.
It always is. And moving on to our next set of friends, our local business owners. Over the past year, the Urban Ministry has promoted small business owners of color by creating what we call our community commercials. And we have showcased incredible food, products, and services. And these commercials actually allow business owners to market their business during a very challenging time in our country. So as you think about your holiday shopping, as you think about places to eat, please remember the businesses that we highlight during these conversations. And at this time, please watch our commercial now about Black biz development and later unified fitness.
My name is Marie Furman, and I am the CEO and president of Black Biz Development Group, LLC. The directory is a digital directory that people who are in business or thinking about getting in business can join. You may not be a Black business. You may be an investor. You may be someone who wants to contribute. You can put your information in the sponsor supporter category, so we know that you are available to help sponsor us and to help support us in any way that you can.
Okay. So I wanted to, before we begin our conversation with folks from the Ujima Project, I wanted to remind you that the first part of our format will be a conversation with the team from Ujima, and we'll take a little commercial break, show another commercial, and then that will be your opportunity when we come back to ask questions. So if you have questions, just know that you're going to have an opportunity to ask them of our visitors. So now is the main part of our discussion tonight. We're so excited to welcome and feature the Ujima Project. The Ujima Project is a Boston-based nonprofit that was founded in 2016. Ujima describes itself as an ecosystem designed to strengthen local economic control and recenter economic power in low-income communities and communities of color in Boston.
The word Ujima comes from Kwanzaa principle for collective work and responsibility. And the Ujima Project works to inspire local Boston communities of color and low-income communities to take responsibility for our communities, to see our neighbors' problems as our own, and to build collective power to solve them together. Ujima seeks to foster an economy based on democracy, sustainability, and justice.
And tonight we're pleased to welcome two members of the Ujima team, Executive Director Nia Evans and Paige Curtis, Culture and Communications Manager. Welcome, Nia and Paige.
Thank you very much. We're very happy to be here.
We're happy to have you.
Yes.
And help me, I think we're all pronouncing your name differently, and pardon me, so please tell me the right way to pronounce your name, the name of the project. Ujima?
Boston Ujima Project. You got it. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So we're excited to have you here. And I actually wanted to begin with a little background on actually planning for this conversation, because I think that you set the tone immediately to let it be known that you wanted to do something really different in the world in the way that you work. So Nia, reached out to you. I've known you over a few years. And when I reached out and said, Nia, would you love to come and talk about your project? You said, well, let me connect you with my team. And there's actually a third person who couldn't be here with us this evening. We're sorry to say, didn't feel well. But you wanted, it was important to you to not be like the executive director speaking on behalf, but that you approach things from a team perspective. And it seemed like that was, you were trying to model right from the get-go something different. And I wanted to know if you would just talk about that, your approach to how you do what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Mary Margaret. And I appreciate you, just kind of pointing out this background information as an illustration of how we work. And so I think one of I guess one of those pieces is we really do just try to, as you said, model our talk. So there are a few ways that we describe Ujima. The way that both you and Monique have described Ujima have been perfect. We also will describe ourselves as a cooperative ecosystem. And so we're not a formal cooperative, but we ourselves, and you'll learn about a little bit more later, very intentionally support formal cooperatives in terms of the formal structure of a cooperative. And we also adhere to cooperative principles. And so that's part of kind of modeling some of our principles. I think the other thing is also modeling how we think about leadership, which is not attached to a particular title. So as you pointed out, we do have formal titles in our organization, and we also know that leadership and expertise is diverse and varied. And so again, it's important for us to, as much as possible, display that. And having more people show up to represent the organization on panels, I think, is one of a unique way to display that. And I think people understand that often an organization is not a singular person, but I think just having the visual of having a few of us talk really drives the point home. So thank you once again for noticing that.
Yeah, thanks, Mia.
Was there anything you wanted to add, Paige, to that?
Not to that. I think you said it perfectly.
Okay, great.
Great. So let me build on that. When we invited you to come to our community conversations, initially it was to speak about closing the racial wealth gap, which is certainly a part of your work. But what you're doing is so much more complex than that. And your promotional materials talk about, we believe that change won't happen if we continue to work in silos, the challenges facing our communities, gentrification, poverty, homelessness, lack of healthcare, unemployment, they're all interconnected. And we need a solution that is probably equally as complex, that can explore the ecosystem of innovative strategies and for transformation. Can you talk a little bit about the complexity in what you're trying to do and about your strategies that you would like to foster some of that change and have the impact in our neighborhoods that you are desiring?
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in here, and Nia will definitely weigh in, I'm sure. But I think one of the things that really stood out for me when I first started at Ujima was this ecosystem approach, right? And that's because, as you all mentioned, the problems that some of the communities of color in Boston are facing, like homelessness, like unemployment and lack of food access, are so systemic and really go back years, right? So it will take not just one solution, but really a web of different approaches to move the needle in an effective way. So I think the complexity really lies in how some of the issues are actually related, right? So for instance, I think of that phrase people often say that it's actually very expensive to be poor, right? So when you live in a sort of low income level, you often have to sort of, borrow capital at higher interest rates, for instance, or even a lot of communities that are underserved by banks, so have to cash their employment checks at predatory businesses that charge them a high fee to do that kind of service. I'm thinking of, sort of the food apartheid that exists in Boston, and folks who don't live near a lot of fresh and healthy food options who obviously pay for that in negative health outcomes. So all these things are very much intertwined, and together can even have a compounding effect, right? So I think we really need that systemic approach, and that's where our kind of web comes in. I don't know, Nia, if you want to add more.
Sure. Thank you, Paige. And that was great. Thank you so much. I think the only thing I'll add are some specifics. So Paige talked about the why of the ecosystem approach, and I'll just really quickly just name the pieces of our ecosystem.
That'd be great.
So I call it an octopus because I think there are probably about seven or eight pieces. At the middle, central to our ecosystem is our membership body. It's what we call our general assembly, and I think we're familiar with assemblies in different forms. We can think about different kind of governing bodies. Another way to think about it within the Ujima context are community gatherings, essentially. And so for us, that's at the heart of the Ujima ecosystem, because what we're doing is we are taking a participatory budget frame or participatory process and adapting it to our investment process. So that takes us to the second piece of the ecosystem, which is the Ujima Fund, which we launched in 2018. And when we launched, it made history as the nation's first democratically governed fund. And what that means is our members, who I mentioned, who are central to our ecosystem, are the ones who directly determine what we invest in. And so that's a little different than traditional investment processes, where generally you'll have some type of an investment committee or some type of generally a smaller body of people, no more than 3, 4, 5, 6 people, who are usually professional experts in the field who make those investment decisions. And I think this kind of links back to your very first question, Mary Margaret, and again, why we really want to try to display diverse types of leadership and expertise. We're saying our community members have the expertise that is required to direct investment and planning and development in our communities. And so we're entrusting our members with that decision. The other thing that makes the Ujima Fund unique is that it's pretty accessible. It's a $5 million fund. We this year had we reached the great milestone of having raised our investment capital goal of $4.5 million. And the minimum investment in the fund is $50. And so it could definitely be more accessible, but you could see that that's pretty accessible, and it offers an investment opportunity as well as a wealth building vehicle for people who, for many people who would not otherwise have those options available to them. The third piece of the ecosystem is our business alliance. So Paige has talked about the expense of being poor. And so when we think about the challenges that the small businesses that we want to work with face, there's definitely expensive capital is one of those challenges. Another challenge is additional support in addition to capital, technical assistance. So support with marketing, for example, support with keeping customers, support with purchasing, things like that. And so our business alliance partners with our businesses to provide additional support in addition to capital. The fourth piece is our anchor institution strategy, where we work with universities and hospitals and faith institutions like you all. So we actually have a really vibrant, robust faith network. And as a result of the great work that our members who are attached to different faith institutions have been able to do, we said, well, we actually think we can come to regard faith institutions as anchor institutions because we can see the type of influence that they potentially have with their purchasing. And usually many faith institutions are pretty impactful presences in their communities. And so our anchor institution strategy is to work with, again, hospitals, universities, and faith institutions to talk about how they can support our businesses by directly purchasing from them and just building just closer relationships. And then there's just two more that I'll name. Our six, I think I'm at number 6. I'm not sure, I've lost count now. But the next piece of the ecosystem is our political advocacy. So we do try to remind people we are a political project as well as an economic project. And again, just really speaking to the importance of the ecosystem approach, recognizing that not only are when we think about the racial wealth gap, when we think about poverty, for example, not only are we talking about systemic issues or areas that are related, we're also talking about, I want to say, for lack of a better word, kind of multi-causal issues. So we see that what happens in policy and what happens in law, as well as what happens directly in finance, for example, matters. And so we do political advocacy. Our flagship issue is to bring a public bank to the state of Massachusetts. And we've been fortunate to see lots of momentum with that this year, with partnering up with Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, who took it on as their #1 policy agenda. We also have a divest invest strategy. So that's working with people to divest from harmful industries like fossil fuels and prisons, and reinvest into productive industries like housing, like financing for businesses owned by people of color. And then finally, our assemblies, where we bring people together again to learn about what our community members' priorities are when it comes to investments.
Thank you. That is a lot, right? Sometimes I feel like I'm complicated talking about the urban ministry. You have even more complexity to share about what you're doing. And I love it. And one of the reasons we really wanted to have, I see your emails, I see all the ways that you're trying to work, and I think it's really exciting. And there's a lot there. And I do know some of our Unitarian Universalist member congregations are involved as faith communities. So we hope we'll kind of tighten some of those connections. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, just to pull one thread from that array of work that you're doing, is the access to capital for BIPOC-owned entrepreneurs' businesses. Can you give an example, just say a little bit about what kind of barriers are faced? And can you give us an example of a business that you invested in, and what impact did that have?
Yeah, you should start.
All right, excellent. Sure. So, and I think the example I give will cover both categories, and then of course, Paige, do feel free to follow up with anything that I've missed. So our current investee, Settle Co-op, as it turns out, is a part of Ujima's origin story. So I'd love to talk about how Settle Co-op came to be, and the support that we're providing with Settle Co-op. So one of the co-founders of Ujima, Aaron Tanaka, who I say Ujima is his brainchild, and I'm not sure if there's anyone here tonight who knows him, but he's the ED of Center for Economic Democracy, which is our fiscal sponsor. Previously was the ED of an organization named Boston Workers Alliance, and Boston Workers Alliance was working with people to reintegrate back home after incarceration. And the primary way they were doing that was via helping them to find employment with a temp agency. And this was a member-based organization, much like Ujima. And the members found that they were experiencing negative stigma and discrimination as a result of their incarceration status. And they felt like they were kind of still at the whims of the benevolence of employers not to discriminate against them. And they arrived at a point where they said, we want to kind of have more control of our own destinies. We think entrepreneurship is a way to do that. If we create jobs for ourselves, we will hire ourselves. We will not be depending on other people not to discriminate against us. And I just want to mention the late former city councilor Chuck Turner was a part of this effort. And so one of the things that they had talked about was starting an alternative fuel company. And it failed. Many businesses kind of fail their first time around. But they kind of learned from that, and they knew that there was legislation coming down a pike. And I do see this question in the chat about a graphic. Yes, so I'll look for that and I'll put that in the chat. But they learned that there was a law coming down a pike that said food businesses with a certain tonnage of food waste would have to compost. And so they said, we think there's a business opportunity here. We can help businesses be in compliance with this law. And so they started a worker-owned composting co-op, Black and Latinx worker-owned composting co-op in Dorchester and Roxbury. So you can imagine you have people who are experiencing discrimination in the job market. They experience the same discrimination in the capital market. So traditional banks would not touch them. And so luckily by this point, Erin, who I mentioned before, was at Boston Impact Initiative, which is our sister fund, which is another great org to learn about. And it was started by Deborah Fries, who was pretty influential in introducing racial justice to the idea of impact investing. And so he was able to learn about alternative financing and able to link this group of people up with different vehicles to get financing that they wouldn't be able to get from the bank. And so what it looked like was them getting a grant from the Bar Foundation was one piece of that capital stack, as we say. They also did what's called a DPO, a direct public offering, and that was actually getting private investments directly from people. And so I mentioned before, this is not an opportunity that's available to many regular people. There are lots of rules, some of which make sense. They are for our safety, and then some of which are a function of classism that kind of determine who can and cannot make private investments in businesses. But they did do a direct public offering where I think the minimum investment was $2,500, and they were able to raise $300,000 through that DPO. They got a forgivable loan from Boston Impact Initiative, and then there's their sweat equity. So to answer your question, definitely the barrier they faced was kind of traditional finance not touching them, experiencing discrimination based, I would say, off of some of their incarceration status. And we definitely know that there was some racial discrimination in the process as well. And where an organization like Ujima came in is being creative and then getting together different types of alternative capital to be able to say, well, let's put together, a package that allows you to have the financing that you were not able to get elsewhere. And I say this is the origin story because from that process, Aaron found himself wondering, well, why doesn't something like this happen more often? The other thing that was happening in that process was with an organization like BII, which is a finance organization, and then you have Boston Workers Alliance, and MassCosh was also part of the process. You have an organizing outfit. You also have two different groups of people who don't work together very often. And that's also a special part of the Ujima ecosystem, where we're bringing together people from all walks of life. We say that we're multi-stakeholder, we're multiracial, we're multi-class, and we're taking, you don't find too many efforts that really try to break out of kind of sectoral silos or geographic silos. So we then moved on to actually ourselves invest in Cetero. That was our first investment vote that we took in 2019. Our members voted affirmatively to invest $100,000 at 4% over 8 years. And I guess just the last thing I'll say about that piece is you may recognize that those are pretty generous terms. So it's not a terribly high interest rate, and 8 years is a good amount of time to get that capital back. And so I'll just pause there, just make sure I answered the question sufficiently.
Definitely, yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, thanks, Nia.
That is excellent. Thank you so much. So just thinking about what Mary Margaret asked about regarding the barriers, can you talk a little bit about how you live into that within our community, with the stakeholders, our staff, and with members?
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that one. I think we take an overall really multi-pronged approach to our work broadly, and when it comes to how we make decisions. Internally as a staff, we use consensus a lot of the time amongst the team to carry out our programming and our work. And I think Nia talked about how we're kind of a flat hierarchy in terms of, we all have titles in our own kind of lanes of work, but we value everyone's experience. And we all have opportunities to lead and kind of add value in different ways. And we all have also a good amount of autonomy too. I think Nia is really good at empowering all of us to kind of take things and run with it. So we have a lot of leeway to kind of bring new ideas into existence. And I think we definitely value experimental, practice. So kind of having space to do that work is really important to us. I think Nia also kind of mentioned the sort of assembly piece of it too. And that's a big part, I think, of how we live out this collaborative work, right? So thinking about those as kind of like thematic convenings, both in neighborhoods in Boston that are important to our work, but also in virtual space. So we do have our open member team meetings, which are every Wednesday, and those are kind of open to the broader public. And we reserve the first Wednesday of every month for what we call co-direct. And that was really a cool space for me because I had never seen an org that actually allows its members to kind of help them co-create solutions with the leadership team, with the staff team. So we co-direct as a space to kind of co-build, co-create solutions. We ask questions of our members, we kind of get their feedback, we kind of troubleshoot together. And that's, again, really important to how we live out the collaborative nature of our ecosystem. We very much see our members as kind of partners in this work, right? And last thing I'll say is that in terms of like both our internal and external facing spaces, we have found ways to kind of move through and come to new and more awesome solutions after conflict or disagreement. I think that's not, I think it's talked about a lot in organizing spaces in terms of how you remedy and kind of like, live and find beauty in conflict, right? There are so many mission-aligned people and orgs in our orbit, but they don't all have the same opinions on how to carry this work out. And that's actually okay. And that's the beauty of what we like to call everyday democracy, right? The sort of clashing of ideas, but you ultimately get a more inclusive solution at the end of that.
So these concepts of inclusivity, of ensuring that many people have a voice, was creating space for conflict, of sort of seeing and honoring, the creative potential of conflict. All those things are hard. I think it sounds great, but it sounds also hard and slow, and different, right? And, when we were talking the other day and kind of planning, for this conversation, one of the things that I asked is, is that way of doing things a pushback against what we would call white supremacy culture, right? Our new mission statement talks about dismantling racism, white supremacy culture. Sometimes when we talk about white supremacy culture, we think of like these, people in white robes, but it's much more than that, right? It's something that we're all kind of in that atmosphere, and there's ways of doing things. And I wonder if you could talk about, is that intentional, like an intentional push for a different way of doing things? And can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Absolutely. I think it absolutely is a response to trying to find different and honestly better ways of working that don't reside in white supremacy culture. So I'll kind of, I think in terms of like decoding what that actually means.
Can you please talk about what is white supremacy culture?
Yeah, I think it shows up in organizations and corporate spaces a lot more than I think we would think it does. It can show up in terms of wanting to believe in perfectionism, right? Getting things perfect and exact and sort of precise to move forward. It can be this sort of binary either or thinking. So good and bad, kind of those really limiting ways of thinking about problems. It can look like this sort of power hoarding or really wanting to remain individual and not cooperative or collaborative or thinking about your community. It can also be, to I think a lot of our points here, having this innate sense of urgency that we need to solve things right now, that a fast pace means progress, right? And I think we're trying to counter all of those things. So instead of perfectionism, we want to see participation, right? We want to see people take part in our solutions and really build with us. Instead of this binary thinking, I think we want to see many possibilities come to fruition, right? I think that gets back to the sort of systemic nature of the problem and kind of having that tentacle of solutions. I think we, again, work collaboratively wherever possible. So I think we even do things like doing collaborative grant making, and that's not a thing that's very common in our like philanthropy experience. So really trying to bring in collaboration where it's not used to being used. And lastly, you know, I think to your point, it can be slow work sometimes, but I think we care more about doing it right and making it a quality decision than we care about making a quick and easy one that perhaps is not going to solve our problems, if that helps.
Very much helps. Yeah.
Thank you. Nia, did you want to add anything to what
No,
Paige?
I thought that was great. All I'll just say is I did drop a text that some people may be familiar with already, that I believe that we're instructed by, and this is from this. It's a text that talks about white supremacy culture as Paige talked about in organizations, from dismantlingracism.org, Tima Akun.
That's awesome. Yeah, really
Excellent.
helpful. Because I think, you know, as the urban ministry, we're trying to think about what does it mean? How does white supremacy culture live in our organization? How do we analyze it? How do we, kind of dismantle it? What are the practices we do that uphold it or dismantle it? And so, I find what you share about, like, letting go of perfectionism, trying to be collaborative, not saying, very healing, frankly. It sounds very healing. So, I just appreciate the work that you're doing and also you shining a light on it. Sorry, Monique, I think I might have.
No, nope, you were just fine. So I was listening to Nia and talking a little bit more about the co-building, the collaborative model, the all-in models that you're using. And it makes me think about how important it is to have multiple voices in this work. And that, oftentimes those voices were never present, which would continue to uphold that white supremacy kind of systematic programming that exists in many places. So I appreciate that model being part of the work that you do every day. So in thinking about that model and how you are pushing and promoting us to, invest in our own communities, invest in ourselves and our businesses, can you talk a little bit about how that looks? What does it take to be an investor? Is there a criteria? What makes one a strong investor? And do you have an example of an investment that Ujima has made and its impact, for the communities of Boston? And any lessons that, you learned and how to do things differently from those experiences?
Sure. Thank you, Monique. So I think in terms of what it takes to be an investor, so a couple of things to point out. Our investment process and our voting process are two different processes. And so that's another thing that's really unique about the Ujima Fund and about our investment process, that the right to vote, so to speak, comes by virtue of being a Ujima voting member. And a Ujima voting member is simply a Ujima member who resides in Boston proper. So that kind of entitlement comes from being a resident. So it doesn't come from having any particular type of expertise, and it actually doesn't even come from having invested oneself. So a voting member does not have to invest to vote. So that's the first thing to point out. The second thing is, as I said, we've definitely tried to make it an accessible vehicle. So we definitely hope as many people as possible that we want to focus on take advantage of the opportunity. Should a voting member invest, it doesn't matter how much they invest. So it doesn't matter whether or not they invest $50 or $250,000, each voting member gets one vote. And so that way we've kind of broken that traditional link between, however many shares you have. For example, if we think about what we may understand more traditionally, will determine kind of our voting power in a corporation, for example, or if we kind of look at systems outside of Ujima, the more money you have, the more kind of influence and power you have.
Mhm.
And so we've worked to kind of de-link that. That said, I think there are definitely ways to be a good investor and ways to be a good voter. And I appreciate, Monique, that you talked about different voices, because we definitely have different types of investors. So we have some investors who are hands off. And, I think that I would say that's a good way to be an investor, depending on who you are. And so it definitely depends on your comfort. Because some of our investors, for example, are people who don't identify as working class, people who don't identify as people of color, and they understand what it is that Ujima is trying to do. And so they've taken the position, we're going to support this project via investment, and I'm not going to have a heavy presence
Mhm.
in it. It's my voice does not need to be kind of amplified here. And so that's one way, depending on who you are, I would say, to be a good investor. Another way to be a good investor, I would say, is for sure to keep abreast, to keep informed of what we're doing. So as Paige pointed out, we do work really hard to make sure we're reaching as many people as possible. We try to be as transparent as possible within reason. We want people to know what we're doing. We want people to see what we're doing, because we think that that's how we kind of get more minds and expertise at the table to help us to continue to build and develop Ujima. So I would say that's another different way to be a good investor, to be attentive. We're having actually speaking of investments, we're having our annual investee report out tomorrow evening at our Ujima Wednesdays. And so that's where our current investment federal co-op will show up to talk about what's happened for them over the year, the challenges, the successes, and they'll also let us know as a membership body how we can be helpful to them. And I think that's the last thing I want to say about how to be a good investor, is to also be thinking about how investors can use their particular position, their particular expertise to help the businesses that we invest in, because that's a big part of our model. Is we're saying we have this really active, passionate membership body that's going to go out of its way to shop at the businesses that we invest in, that's going to go out of its way to advocate on behalf of those investments. And so that's one of the kind of unique value adds that we add. I do want to talk about what it takes to be a good voter, which probably isn't surprising. It's probably what it takes to be a good voter in any arena, which I think for us, the number one thing that we would say is, again, to be attentive and to really try to get as informed as possible. So we do put a lot of effort and resources towards informing our voters. So we definitely have people who have said, when some of the stuff you're talking about, economics, finance, I don't get it. Actually, I don't understand. And I love what you're doing. And I do feel like I need some more grounding in some of the economic terms and the financial terms. Mm-hmm. So we always try to think of really creative ways, not to kind of beat people over the head with it, but as many opportunities as possible to get people comfortable in dealing with the subject matter. So for example, last week, we released a credit memo about the next investment that we're looking at, Dorchester Food Co-op. And we did a live Q&A to walk people through the credit memo. And so that's an opportunity to kind of learn about, okay, what is it that we look at when we're looking to invest in a business? What do we want to know about their finances? What do we want to know about their management team, et cetera? And so really just, get as informed, be as informed as possible, not to be afraid of the subject matter. And again, when we say we have the expertise, we believe that and we mean that. It's just been a matter of the expertise not having been readily accessible to everyone. And so when our role now is to make it more widely accessible, and to understand that once we kind of put tools in more people's hands, we'll be able to use it. And then finally, actually vote. So that's the toughest part of our job. Again, not surprising. I think we see that in arenas outside of Ujima. When we look at the Boston election, for example, the voting rate was really low. So I think one of the things we deal with there is, so many of us by this point, we've had a lot of history and a lot of background with our democracy. And I would say probably many of us at best by this point, we're probably pretty skeptical of it in terms of, and Monique, again, you talked about, the fact we don't hear from many voices. So we have a lot of people in our communities who are not used to people hearing us and people listening to us. And we've had a history of people telling us they're listening to us and asking us for input and inviting us to participate in particular processes and running us through certain motions. But then either the final decision is so disconnected and we have no idea how that final decision was made because there's not been any transparency, or the processes themselves have been problematic. It's really hard to fully grasp, oh, wow, I actually do have power here. I will actually be heard. I will actually be listened to. So we have found that's our hardest job. When we did our very first vote, and we were struggling to get quorum, and our quorum is 50% plus one of our voting members, and we have around 400 voting members. So every time we do this, we got to get upwards of around 200 people to vote to make a binding decision. When we were contacting people and saying, hey, if you don't vote, we can't make any investments, a lot of the response was, oh, wow, I didn't realize that it mattered that much. I didn't realize it was getting in the way. I didn't realize my vote mattered so much. Mm-hmm. So the last thing I would say about that is that, yeah, a way a voter can be a good voter with us is to vote, because it really is not a formality for us.
Yeah. Awesome. That was really illuminating. Thank you very much. I think what we want to do for a moment is take a break, let people start to think of their questions that they have. And, as we mentioned at the beginning, part of our mission is to work for racial, social, and economic justice. And part of that has been doing our own work to amplify Black-owned business, especially in Roxbury, and to create these commercials and to encourage those who are listening, those in our member congregations, those in our neighborhood, to support those businesses. So we wanted to show one of our commercials about Unified Fitness. It's a gym that is locally owned, and we encourage people to think about joining, to buy a membership for somebody for Christmas, to kind of support this, share it. So we're going to take a moment to show our commercial. We're going to go off camera for just a minute, and then we're going to come back. And this is an opportunity for those in our audience to ask questions of Nia and Paige. So we'll be right back with you. Our commercial.
Hi, my name is Emmanuel Williams, the owner operator of Unified Fitness Hyde Park, 1 Weston House Plaza. I love to help people get to where they're trying to get to, being reintroduced to who they are physically and spiritually. The spiritual side of the body is connected with the natural side of the body. Your body is your temple, and the only person that has control of it is you. My fitness background is life experience. I used to be 400 pounds. So when I changed my lifestyle, it opened up a new pathway for me in helping people get to where they want to be. And that's how Unified Fitness started. Unified mind, body, and spirit. If you are a participant or somebody that want to train and have never worked out before, we will gradually take you into a workout, design a workout that is designed for you to grow, so we can move into a higher level workout experience. Our gym is small, friendly. We observe all mask protocols, sanitizing, wiping the machines. So when you come in, feel safe. We are a feel safe zone. So set up a consultation with me at Unified Fitness. We can meet and talk about your goals. Until then, always strive with purpose and expect change. Be fabulous.
All right, welcome back. Remember to be fabulous. this evening. So, so I'm excited to open up our, yes, thank you, Mia. Love that commercial. We love it too. Our Social Justice Fellow for the Arts and Humanities, Bithia Israel, has been creating these commercials for the last, 16 months or so, and we love sharing them. So we're going to open it up to questions, but I think I'm going to start with my own on the heels of commenting about Bithia, our Social Justice Fellow for the Arts. And Paige, your title is related to the arts. And I wonder if you could talk about what role does the arts have to play in your work? And then we're starting to get some questions, and we'll go to the panel, the audience questions then.
Awesome. Great. I love this question. And I think it's the part of our work that I think I'm most proud of. So our overall commitment to the arts and cultural community in Boston. And it's out of the belief that, artists and cultural workers are like really vital economy builders, right? Like they are the lifeblood of the city. They make Boston dynamic. So we offer a couple of ways to kind of co-lead this work with us. One is kind of our organizing space. So we do have an arts and cultural member team dedicated to people of that interest and background who want a way to kind of organize and learn and share inspiration. So we do have that as part of our member team offerings. We also have a lot of granting opportunities now. So we just wrapped up our big Ashe Cultural Assembly. That was a couple of month-long series of workshops and events, and kind of wrapped up with a huge granting opportunity that we just closed that is going to give around $5,000 to a Boston-based artist or cultural worker for some kind of public arts project of their choice. And that was all collaboratively designed and selected by our members. They have to vote on the person they wanted to receive these grants, right? So we do kind of have our own arts granting arm, but we also circulate a lot of opportunities from our partners. So we do share other, jobs and other grants and kind of things that are important for artists to kind of be aware of. We'll kind of share that out through our networks to make sure that people are informed of what's coming down the pike. We also want to just promote and support artists that we like, especially BIPOC artists. So we do believe in trying to sort of patronize their work and their endeavors, and kind of make sure they have all the sort of support that they need to kind of thrive in the city. Yeah, I think that's everything. But I love that part of our work really makes it vibrant.
Yeah, and we'd love to find a way to maybe intersect a little bit with some of the work that we're doing with artists. We have an artist catalog that's on our website. That's Roxbury Artists of Color for people to do their holiday shopping. So I'm just going to do a plug for that to go to our website, and you can support Roxbury Artists of Color.
Nice.
So, Reef, do you want to start fielding some of the questions coming in?
Absolutely. Sure can. Thank you for that plug for our artist program. Thank you, Mary Margaret. So I think one of the questions that came in was, is there a centralized website? And I think you posted that information already, or has that gone in already?
And the question is there a centralized website where people outside of Boston can browse the goods and services your businesses offer?
There is, and I think, I was gonna say, if I'm reading Paige's face correctly, maybe she's looking for it. But if you go to ujimaboston.com, and if you go to our economy builders page, in the middle of the page, you'll see our good business directory, and Paige has just dropped it in the chat. And I'm getting ready to drop in the chat. Speaking of artist catalog, the virtual exhibition that we put together for the granting process that Paige just talked about. So invite you all to check out.
That would be great. Yeah.
Thank you, Mia. Excellent. All right. And there's another question in the chat from Leslie. She wants to know, what has been your biggest challenge?
You want to start us off, Paige? We might say different things.
I think the biggest challenge for me has been that there is so much potential. I think Ujima has already done so much, materially, in terms of the fund and kind of rallying our members granting our assemblies. But there's so much more that we're going to do and that we can do. And again, the beauty of the sort of systemic model ecosystem is that it does provide for a lot of different avenues of work to happen all at once. So I think the challenge is just like figuring out, priority of different parts of that work. Because a lot of it is so exciting and like really dynamic, but we obviously can't do all things at once. So I think that's the kind of biggest challenge for me.
How about for you, Nia?
Yeah, and I would say the biggest challenge is the voting. So ultimately, we can't make investments until we reach quorum. And it takes pretty mammoth efforts from us, and it's not a challenge that we can't overcome. So we learn every single time we do a vote, and just as kind of a metric, so to speak, we've held 7 votes so far, and 5 have successfully reached quorum. So we had 2 that didn't reach quorum, and they're each different. So we're still kind of arriving at the point. Or we're still trying to get to the point where we can kind of have a standard process for our voting, because each one has been different so far. We feel like we're learning each time, but I would say that's the biggest challenge, because ultimately we have a $5 million fund. We have $4.5 million in capital that we want to get out the door, and we need our voting members to help us do that.
Probably takes a lot of relationship building to get everybody there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I would bet everything. Yeah.
Which is why that collaborative model is so important and will continue to drive the work that you're doing. So thanks. And there's one other question as well. I don't know if you, let's see, from Claire. Is there a platform for individual investors who live outside of Boston? It's a very good question.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And so if you go to ujimaboston.com/invest, that is where any investor both in and outside of Boston can invest. When you go there now, you will see that we've closed the fund for investment, and because we've reached our capital goal. And what is an option now is to donate to the loan loss reserve for the fund. And I see that Claire has dropped another question in. Do you specifically? Yes, absolutely. And so I'm sorry, that was from Christy. We have community standards. So we have 36 minimum standards. And I think Paige is going to drop the link to the standards in the chat that businesses have to meet to receive investment from us. And Paige will drop that in the chat. So that.
Can you give it a couple of examples about what your expectations are of the businesses that you invest in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 8 broad categories. So we look at things like membership. So not membership, I'm sorry, ownership. So at least 50% BIPOC owned, for example, when it comes to ownership. We look at what's happening with workers in the workplace. So we say, for example, you need to have a policy that kind of sees to like the health and well-being of transgender workers, for example, kind of see to their safety. We have a compensation ratio standard. So we said the compensation ratio can't be more than 5 to 1 from the top paid person to the lowest paid person. And then there are some that are kind of more commitments to learn, because people hear 36 and that seems like a lot. And so then people kind of wonder if it's prohibitive, but it's things like learn about open book accounting. And so it's just learn about it. And then maybe that's a practice you want to apply to your organization. Learn about different types of employee ownership. Do a green energy audit. So we also see to the environment. So kind of do a green energy audit to see what a green energy plan would look like for your business. What would a zero waste plan look like for your business? So those are examples of some standards.
It does. I'm going to say again, as I listen to you, Nia, it's like not just about closing the racial wealth gap, which was the premise. There's so much more. I mean, it's so much about, to me, what I hear is like trying to heal what is, like at every level, which is complicated and ambitious and wonderful. And I just appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Margaret.
Yeah, I'm gonna share a question from our friend Kathy here, which is, Can you share information about your staffing level, your board organization? How are you organized in an org chart?
Yeah, sure. So we have a fiscal sponsor. So we are an unincorporated entity. So we have a fiscal sponsor, Center for Economic Democracy, which is a 501c3. And so then through them, essentially, we operate as a nonprofit. We have always get this number wrong. I want to say there are 5 of us full time.
Okay.
And we have, in addition to our 5 full-time staff members, we currently have a fund management fellow who's a student who works with us part-time, and we have 2 additional interns. We're bringing on a 3rd intern, and so we've try to develop kind of a deep bench of interns and fellows that support our 5 full-time staff members.
Okay, great.
Excellent, thank you. So in thinking about your board development and all of who's involved, can you just talk a little bit, and this is one of the questions that came in, talk a little bit about the work that you see Ujima doing in the coming years, which is a very broad question, but you can, narrow down as much as you can, because I'm sure it's pretty lofty. You want to do everything, but, in a snapshot, what are some of the things you want to do?
Do you want to start us off, Paige?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, my role is very focused on, communications and culture, right? So I think in terms of those 2 things, I mean, I would love for Ujima to become more of a hub for BIPOC storytelling on solidarity economy. And I think that term solidarity economy is probably gaining prevalence now, but there's a lot of folks who don't understand what that is, or don't kind of see their place in it, or don't know that people have been doing this for so long, that BIPOC communities have been doing mutual aid work and solidarity work for a very long time. And we do want to kind of uplift that history as part of our work. So I think as we grow, I would love to, really expand our communications portfolio. I think many of you know that we have a really robust email newsletter that we create content for. We obviously have social media, but I think we really want to be able to do more expansive storytelling. And I think that's important because I think someone asked in the chat, how are we engaging people, to kind of vote, to sort of, help us get quorum, to kind of invest when these communities have a history of being let down by nonprofits and other leaders who aren't listening to them. And I think storytelling is a big part of that. So really trying to help connect people to different parts of our mission, see that they are a partner in the work themselves, and kind of give them meaty offerings to learn about these principles and kind of add to them. So I do think the comms piece is really important to our growth over the next couple of years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think what I'll add to that is, so one of the things we said early on in terms of a trajectory for Ujima is this $5 million fund in our world, it's small. So what's interesting is when we first were setting out and kind of trying things out in 2016, and you may have been there, Mary Margaret, I'm not sure, but in 2016, we did a solidarity summit at Hibernian Hall, and we were calling that a pilot, and that was with $20,000, and that was, okay, let's see. And we had raised $10,000 in 3 days for 175 community members, and then we had gotten $10,000 in matching funds, and we had given microloans to 5 businesses that day. And so now here we are with a $5 million fund that we are now saying this is the pilot. And so what we've said is, if we can show some success here, then we're looking at a next fund that's a $25 million fund. And so what's exciting is we've already started to think about what that looks like. So we started an exploration with Fenway CDC and Somerville CDC at the end of last year, who was interested, and they were both interested in taking our participatory process and merging it with their development to provide community ownership in their development. And so we've been on this exploration, which now has us at the point where we're saying, okay, we think the next fund is going to be a $25 million fund that'll be focused on real estate, and that will really excitedly provide direct community ownership for people who participate in that fund. So that's one piece of Ujima's trajectory that I can talk about right now.
Yeah, that's desperately needed, the housing piece, right? Yeah.
Excellent.
Was one of your, I'm curious, that the first, that first pilot, the smaller pilot, was Fresh Food Generation one of the places that you did the seed money? Yeah, I remember.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's great. That's a great business. I saw another question. There's a few coming in the different functions, but one was, have you applied for 501c3 status?
We have not. So we are going to embark on an exploration actually next year, where we're going to be thinking about what we want Ujima's independent structure to be. And we want to do that exploration just because we are aware of some other structures that are out there that may be more suited to what Ujima is thinking about in the future. And so we didn't want to just automatically default to a C3.
I can see that.
So in consideration, but we're going to explore some other structures as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Nia. Let's see. Another question is, so much of this work depends on involvement, civic and voter engagement, sweat equity, and just convening a quorum. In long underserved neighborhoods where people have, where people have experienced a history of being asked to get involved with little results to show for it, what are you doing to promote engagement that is working?
Yeah, so I think one of the things, so I think fortunately for us, we came in, the group of us who were working with Ujima at the beginning, we came in with a well of relationships. So I think one of the things is our respective relationships allowed us to I think move with some grace and some trust. And so we definitely, I think, still work off of that. So for example, before Ujima, I was the ED at the Boston branch of the NAACP. I mentioned Aaron already, who was at BWA. Lisa Owens, who's currently the ED of Himes, and at the time was the ED of City Life, was a part of incubating Ujima. Deborah Fries, who brought her relationships. And so there were a group of us who came in with trust. And that was trust that we had developed with fellow community members before starting Ujima. And so that's really important. But I think that type of trust, when we look at the efforts that you talk about and kind of ways in which our community members' trust is violated, I think a lot of times entities who are trying to deal with that, what they don't take into consideration is you can't be thinking about this short term. So if over the long term, you've not been building relationships, and I would say, and if you've not been building relationships because you value the relationships in and of themselves, not because you're being transactional about them, then you will find yourself at a point where you wish you had moved differently. So that's one thing. The second thing is as I said, with each effort we learned. So for example, with the very first vote that we held, it actually took us 4 months to reach quorum. We asked 4 questions at that time. So for us, I think there were 2 primary things we felt, well, I would say 3 primary things we felt like we learned. One, we probably asked too many questions at one time. And so we definitely won't do that again. So that was something that we learned. The second thing was, one of the questions we asked, we thought people wanted to weigh in on, and then we learned, well, actually, people were curious about it. They didn't necessarily want to weigh in on it. And so that question was, where should we put the undeployed money? And that's because people were asking us, what bank are you going to use, et cetera. So we said, okay, well, let's put this to Ujima members for a vote. But we have people telling us, I don't really think I should be the one deciding that. I don't feel equipped to handle that. So that was a lesson learned for us, that that we should actually learn what people do want to weigh in on first. That's a new process for us. So now we have something called voter affirmation, where we say, here are the votes that are coming up. what do you want to participate in? And so in that way, we've taken voting from an all or nothing proposition to
Mhm.
you tell us where it is you want to have voice, and feel free not to have voice in the areas that are of less concern for less concern to you.
Yeah, I hear that. There's a question here from Leonard and Nancy, which is, how do you relate to the healthcare system?
All right, I think I'll take that one as well. Yeah, so actually, we did a project last year that we started in 2019 with BMC, and I'm not sure if people are familiar with their DON process, the determination of needs process. But when hospitals are undergoing, I guess like construction or development, right? They have to do a certain amount of community benefit. So BMC, Brigham and Women's, and I want to say Boston Children's Hospital had a huge DON process in 2019. And so we participated in that process in designing a participatory process for some of that money. So that was a pretty cool project. So I think that's just kind of another way, when I mentioned our anchor institution strategy earlier, and talking with them about purchasing from our businesses. We can also work with anchor institutions on processes that they can then decide to undertake themselves. So we may, for example, next year, actually undergo a participatory process with them for some of that money.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So there's another question, and it says, what is your relationship to the Black Economic Council of Boston? Paige or Nia? Who wants to take that one?
I would say shortest version is that BECMA are our friends and comrades in this work. We partner with them on a range of programs. The most recent of which was the mass, the BECMA Black Mass. God, help me, Nia. I think you're on mute.
The Mass Black Expo.
Mass Black Expo, yes, that was led by BECMA. But I think we have very similar goals, very aligned, very supportive of their work. I think Nia has a longer lasting rapport with their former now ED Shagun. I don't know if you want to add more, Nia.
Yeah, sure. So this is always take an opportunity to make fun of Shagun as much as possible. So Shagun is my buddy, and I will sometimes call him my little brother. But yeah, so again, just when I kind of talk about relationships coming in, so that's a long-term relationship that both Shagun and I have carried to our respective orgs, and as Paige said, we're partners in much of the work. And as I mentioned earlier, they adopted bringing a public bank to Massachusetts as their #1 policy item. So we work very closely on that advocacy. And we also participated in our arts granting effort. So we also partnered together on getting resources to artists and small businesses in Boston.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And here's another question from Anne. Thank you for this conversation. I love the Boston Ujima Project. I'm wondering if there is involvement, outreach with Indigenous artists, businesses, and organizations in the Boston area.
Yes. So another one of our partners in the work is NACOB, North American Indian Center of Boston. And we've been slowly building relationship with them. And I would say slowly because we want to be thoughtful. So conversations with regards to Indigenous communities has come a long way. And then I think, just what we want to be careful with conversations that are kind of newly, at the forefront of our collective consciousness is not to kind of be exploitative with them. And so when we did our citywide assembly in 2018, that's when we set out with relationship NACOB, relationship building with NACOB, and following their lead. In terms of our relationship. So NACOB is also a partner in the public banking work that we do, and NACOB and Ujima and BECMA are founding org members of the Black Mass Coalition, that came together in the wake of George Floyd's murder last year to set an ambitious agenda, an ambitious 10-year agenda. And part of that agenda includes Indigenous legislative agenda, as well as repatriation of land.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. So Nia and Paige, we have an audience of folks who are really interested in what you are doing and want to support. How best can our congregational churches and community members support the work that you are doing?
Do you want to take that, Paige?
I could start. I would definitely love if you added. I think at minimum, definitely spending time to sit with the website, our content.
Mhm.
If you're not subscribed to our email list, that is our primary channel for broad storytelling, updates, and kind of more actionable things to do. Well, yeah, add more, Nia.
Yeah, come hang out with us, essentially. Come hang out with us. So we do Ujima Wednesdays every Wednesday. When I recognize a couple of our members here who show up, I'm going to shout some people out. Hopefully I don't embarrass them, but James Gordon, I see, who joins us at our Ujima Wednesdays. I see John Hickey, I see Ann Gilmore. So come hang out with us. You can learn at our political and financial education workshops. You can also check out our member teams. So that's our member teams are a huge avenue that we provide for Ujima members and for the public to co-create Ujima with us. And so, yeah, I would just say, just hang out with us when we have cool events like this one. I just want to say, by the way, I really love this program. I love the commercials.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, we want to see you there and just build with us.
Yeah. And they can invest, right? If they have funds, they can be an investor and hopefully one.
Well, not right now, only because we've met our goal. So we have closed the fund for investing.
Okay.
We have closed this fund for investing, but they can invest in our new fund. They can donate to the loan loss reserve for the fund. So we do still need donations for that. And that's an event that businesses can't pay us back. And they can donate to the org. So you've learned what the staffing is. So we do need great people to make this happen. So in addition to investing, those are some additional ways you can materially resource the work.
That's awesome. And I hope that we'll find ways to intersect. We have a social justice fellow for the arts and humanities, and we try to do some of our work through the arts too. So I think there's some intersections there. And one of the things that I had mentioned to Paige the other day is that we're renovating our historic meeting house as an event venue, and we have a lot of green space. And so as you think about your arts, and I was thinking about the storytelling piece, when we get back to post-acute pandemic and we can do more things in person inside the building, or when it gets nicer weather and we have a lot of green space, we would love for you to think about, bringing the work that you do and how we can collaborate and connect in John Elliott Square. We'd love to have you.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, we launched in your space. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, well, I'm proud of that. I'll never forget it. I don't know if I remembered, but I'll never forget it anyway. That's what we want our space to be about. So that means a lot. So thanks for mentioning that.
Absolutely.
So can you write down the name of the fund that is accepting donations? Can you put that in the chat? And I'm gonna the money pool. You already did. Okay, way quicker than I am. So, and if any of our folks want to get connected, you also can reach out to us and we'll be happy to connect you as well. So thank you, Nia and Paige, so much for being here. I want to thank, again, our sponsoring congregation, First Parish in Concord. We're proud to connect with them as well. And we know that they care deeply about racial and social justice, and that's why they're sponsoring this evening's community conversation. So thank you. I think, Monique, do you have last words of wisdom that you want to give?
Well, I would say to everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And Nia, Paige, I greatly appreciate and honor the work that you are doing to help build up our community. And to our audience members, I hope that you are able to find some space in your hearts and in your pockets to donate, support this organization in what they're doing. Thank you so much, everybody.
And spread the word
Thank
about
you.
Ujima, like spread it in your circles, right? Like spread the word.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you all for being here tonight with us.
And we hope that you will be on next month's community conversation when we actually, Paige, you'll want to tune in. It's Artists as Activists. That's the topic. We're going to talk with Ash Gordon, who's founder of Castle of Our Skins, and our own Bithia Israel, our social justice fellow, talking about how they see the arts as a platform for making real systemic and meaningful change. So hope folks will tune in for that.
Yes.
Yeah, Paige, thank you for sharing this evening with us. Really appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you all.
All right. Good night. See you next month, folks.